The new theater of the mind. The Bruce Collins Show.
And welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight, we'll be talking to Megan Barth about her website, ReaganBaby.com, and her thoughts about the inevitable campaigns of 2016. We'll also be joined by a man who worked with the Muppets and David Letterman and has a lifetime of show business memories and is the author of Breaking Out of Show Business. His name is Michael Paul Ziegfeld. The Bruce Collins Show airs every Friday night at midnight right here at WWPR, 1490 AM. You can listen to past archives of The Bruce Collins Show at ipbn-fm.com. That's ipbn-fm.com. There's a tab just for The Bruce Collins Show on the Intrepid Paradigm Broadcasting Network website. Again, that's ipbn-fm.com. We would appreciate it if you're able to spread the word for our show by word of mouth, social media, or in whatever creative way you can. Also, we have a Facebook page for The Bruce Collins Show. Please like us there. And you can email the show at bruce_collins_show@AOL.com. The Bruce Collins Show also has a YouTube channel. Visit YouTube, search for The Bruce Collins Show channel, and subscribe, and also catch all the latest shows on YouTube. And now let me introduce my co-host, Chad Miles. He once went into an Italian restaurant, Buca di Beppo, and thought his waiter's name was Al Dente. And he's also the former congressional candidate in Michigan and a military veteran, and is the founder and executive director of Sling and Stone Outfitters, an organization that is dedicated to helping disabled veterans experience the outdoors. You can find out more information on his website, chadmiles.com. He is radio's lethal weapon, Chad Miles. Welcome back to the program, Chad.
Hey, Bruce, our mutual friend Richard Grund asked a question today. He said, if you're radio's lethal weapon, are you Danny Glover or are you Mel Gibson?
Okay.
So I just said, you listen and you decide.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to give us an answer.
No, there's no answer. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I know, in your spare time, you've been perfecting the perfect candy. You have an old fondue machine and a bag of peanuts, and you're trying to make C&M candies, I heard. You just don't know how to make that hard shell yet, and I'm not sure either.
I just can't figure it out, Bruce. But you know what I can figure out?
What's that?
Weird news stories. Do you want to hear some?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, I have some for you. Here we go. The Australian abstract expressionist Elida Andre began painting professionally at age 9 months, said her parents, and by 22 months had her own exhibit at Melbourne's Brunswick Street Gallery. And by the age of 4, the paintbrush-armed toddler had enjoyed a $24,000 sale.
Must be nice.
Yeah. She has now also distinguished herself as an artist of another type while explaining her approach. In April, the now 8-year-old told news.com.au, I interpret my style of painting as a magic abstract universe.
Wow.
It doesn't sit in any one tiny sphere in all realism. It goes out and it explores the world. She acknowledged seeing things, e.g. rabbits, that an 8-year-old might, but pointed out that she also sees the cosmos. I just feel free. I don't feel locked up in a tiny world.
Huh.
And that's from news.com.au in Sydney.
She would be the perfect writer for L.A. Marzulli's monthly newsletter, I think.
She is a genius tree hugger, it seems like to me.
You know what that kid needs along with a paintbrush? A good spanking.
A time out.
Oh,
back to reality.
You're not supposed to say spanking anymore, that's right.
Yeah, I was a little more politically correct than you, but that's okay.
That's right. It's probably why I don't have kids.
Hey, I'll tell you what, speaking of, if anybody else wants to buy a child painting for $24,000, I have plenty of them. So look me up at chad@chadmouse.com.
Yeah. All I need to do is sell a couple of those and I can retire.
Yeah. I don't know about retiring, but it would be nice. And I'll cut you a deal. I'll sell it to you for $10,000. How's that?
I honestly thought when you started that sentence you were going to say you were selling one of your kids. Seriously. I was glad it was just a painting.
No, but people might pay me to bring them back.
That's right.
That was kind of a Rodney Dangerfield comment,
I
wasn't
shouldn't
it?
agree with that.
Moving on before I get in trouble. Dan Kennedy of Salt Lake City was driving to work on March 31st when a large bag fell off of the truck in front of him. And for traffic safety, he stopped to move it from the road and discovered it contained about 75 pounds worth of U.S. currency.
Wow.
Which was about $22,000 in a plastic bag marked with the name of the Brinks Armored Truck Company. The bag remained sealed because any tear would have produced, quote, leakage, unquote, weakening Brinks' claims on the loose money. And Kennedy dutifully contacted state troopers and handed it over. He sounded perplexed when Brinks immediately sent him a $5,000 gift check.
Man.
Why would I get anything for that? Almost anyone, he said, would have done that, or would have done what he did. And that's from KSL TV.
Yeah. Well, that's actually refreshing. But still, think about it. He found $22,000. He still needs $2,000 for a painting.
That's right. Hey, it's a few years and years ago, maybe 10 years ago or a little longer, my wife and I found $350 in a parking lot in Michigan.
Wow.
It was a wad of money. And we just kind of sat there in the car. It was in the parking lot, and I picked it up, and we didn't know what to do, so we just started walking around and looking for the person whose money it was. And we finally found it. It was this lady. It was a Blockbuster video store. That's how long ago this was. And she was in there, and I think she was a single mother, and she was with her child, and she was just crying, at the counter. I think she had gone to pay for something, and then she realized she didn't have any money. And a little boy came out in the parking lot and was looking around, and my wife went up to him, and she said, did you lose some money? And he said, yeah, my mama lost some money. Little African-American boy. And so we went back in, and this lady had cashed her paycheck and then lost it in the parking lot.
Wow.
And we gave it back to her, and we felt really good about ourselves. But it's funny, I think of if we would have just said, I found $350, and we just would have taken off.
Yeah.
This was this lady's paycheck for the week, so.
Yeah, I found a woman's wallet in the parking lot of where I worked, and I immediately walked it right into the security of the building, because I thought, that person is going to probably worry all night, because it had.
Exactly.
I assume it had. I didn't actually open it up, but I assumed it would have had like credit cards, ID, and cash. So it was a pretty big, thick pocketbook, and yeah. So think about that. Think about, I don't know what this person's faith is. He's from Salt Lake City. He could be a Christian. He could be Mormon. I don't know, but there's so much bashing of Christianity, but 9 times out of 10, I'd like to think that if a Christian finds money, that they return it to the rightful party, because obviously it is the right thing to do.
Yep, it is definitely the right thing to do. Moving on. Police in Malagaon, India, seeking to reduce tensions between Muslims and Hindus over the theft and butchering of cattle, which the latter hold sacred, requested that local farmers send them mug shots of their cows, along with other biographical information, such as why the farmer has the cow in the first place, so they could build a database to improve bovine security.
Yeah.
And that's from a French newspaper via MSN.com.
You see the picture of that cow, he is up to no good. That cow is misbehaving to the maximum.
Well, I would say he's fun to be with, and He has a birthmark on his left ear.
So he says that the latter hold sacred, so the Hindus hold sacred the cattle, and the Muslims must be eating them.
Yeah, I think the Muslims hold goats sacred.
Yeah. Database of cows. I wonder if that would be on the web somewhere. I would like to see that.
Cow mugshots.
Yeah, cow mugshots and biographical information.
Biographical information.
This cow was born in a small village.
At the age of 3,
Yeah,
he learned to paint.
that's right.
And then we sold it for $25,000. Moving
exactly.
on. According to the mayor of Rio de Janeiro, it appears that some of the 2016 Summer Olympics aquatic events will take place among floating household trash and raw sewage
Nice.
in Guanabara Bay.
Guanabara Bay.
Guanabara
Bada
Bay.
boom, bada bing. Guanabara
Bada
Bay.
boom. It sounds like that Italian restaurant I went to earlier in the show.
Yeah.
Although Mayor Eduardo Paez noted to the Associated Press in March that the events are scheduled for the cleanest part of the bay to acquire the games, organizers had promised a massive cleanup. But now, with 500 days to go, Paez concedes that the goals will not be met and that indeed infrastructure improvements still have not halted the sewage flow into the bay. That's from the Associated Press.
I think I'm going to watch the 2016 Olympics just for that fact. To watch the garbage, like the synchronized swimming.
Isn't that crazy?
Say, is that a Snickers bar floating by? I hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
Hey, it's funny. When I read this story, it immediately came to my mind when I was in Egypt when I was younger. This was back in 1994. I was with some other people, and we went to look at the Nile River in Cairo. We were in Cairo. And I was so disappointed because there was all this trash floating around. And as we stood there, this is a true story. As we stood there, a dead donkey floated down the river right in front of us.
Did you have a drink of the water?
I couldn't know. Another funny story, speaking of the water, I was careful not to drink the water, but I had a drink that had ice in it, and I ended up getting sick from the ice in my drink.
Yeah.
So, traveler lesson learned.
The raw sewage of Guanabara Bay.
Guanabara Bay.
Yes, I will be watching the Olympics for all the water sports. That should be fun.
I could just see them in one of those rowing events, and they're rowing and they're knocking into sewage and cups and trash.
Hey, I have a breaking news before you get to your next news story, and this is about bed bugs.
Oh.
We talked about bed bugs last week, and now there's it wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago, but there was a story about a man who was trying to fight bed bugs on his couch by setting his couch ablaze, and he was trying to take it out, and he burned his house down.
Right.
And his name was Fred Horn. I'll never forget that. And unfortunately, there's been a Fox News story. A Long Island man accidentally set his rental car ablaze in an effort to kill bed bugs, police say. Authorities say 44-year-old Scott Kemery poured rubbing alcohol on the bed bugs because he thought it would do the trick. Then he lit a cigarette, setting himself and 3 cars on fire. He said he had bed bugs in the car, and someone told him if he saturated them with alcohol, it would kill them. Detective Sergeant Edward Fitzgerald told Newsday. So he went and bought some alcohol. Sounds like he drank it. He poured it all in there, and he sat in his car with a lit cigarette. Kemery was treated at a local hospital for second-degree burns and will be okay. Yeah, right. Authorities say Kemery won't face criminal charges. Unbelievable. But he actually set the car on fire just like Fred Horn.
Hey, I don't think he will ever really be okay, if you know what I mean. I think he's one sandwich short of a picnic.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if we're getting the full story there. I was trying to kill some bed bugs.
Hey, Leroy, hold my beer. Watch this.
Yeah. I'm putting a gas in my car, and there seems like there's a projectile in my gas tank. I think I'll stick my head down there while I'm smoking a cigarette.
Hey, speaking of stupid people, I have a stupid criminal story right here.
Excellent. Wow.
Fresh off the printer.
I can tell it's real paper, too.
This is what did David Letterman used to do? He had those blue
I remember that.
note cards, and he would shake them around.
That's right.
Perpetrators on the run frequently, unintentionally reveal their whereabouts by their need to show off on social media. But Christopher Wallace has reached legendary show-off status. Being sought in connection with a January burglary, he went to his home in Fairfield, Maine, and posted on the Snapchat site that that's where he was.
Stupid.
Police arrived and during their canvass noticed a brand new Snapchat post from Wallace, mischievously writing that police were in his home right then searching for him, but that he was cunningly hiding in a cabinet. Police opened the cabinet and arrested him.
What an idiot.
That's from the Associated Press.
Police don't know I'm going to the bathroom right now. And up next, Megan Barth and Paul Ziegfeld. In a moment. Joining me right now is Megan Barth. Megan Barth is the founder and proprietor of ReaganBaby.com and a nationally recognized political commentator and women's rights advocate. Megan Barth, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Thanks. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. Now, tell us first, when I was a teenager, Reagan was president, and I was so into Ronald Reagan, I did a book report in class. So tell us about your website, ReaganBaby.com. What does that term mean, and what can people find at your website?
Well, I've always considered myself a Reagan baby. I was a young girl and witnessed the malaise of the Carter years based on my family's own experience as well as our relatives. And every Sunday we would get together as a very large and extended family, normally after church. And my Aunt Nan or my grandmother would have people, and we'd sit around the table and have brunch. And they would always talk about current events. It was always kind of political in nature. And we had both sides of the coin represented on my family. You know, so it was like crossfire across our table sometimes on Sundays. And so as a young girl, I was witness to this, and I absorbed a lot of it. And then my girlfriend had reminded me that, I think around the time I was in 7th grade or so, I had a I Heart Reagan sticker on my bedroom door. And I always grew up with a reverence for Reagan. He was kind of a hero of sorts to my family as well as some of my extended family. And it was just a time of optimism that I remember. And when I decided to start Reagan Baby, my blog, it was based on the fact that I just didn't simply like what I was seeing and hearing from both sides of the coin, whether they be Republican or Democrat, and also the press. So I entitled, the subtitle is When They Can't See the Light, Make Them Feel the Heat. And the heat is all that is kind of going on in current events from a very common sense perspective. And that's what I bring to the table. Now, and that's what Reagan Baby is about.
Is it merely a coincidence that your first name rhymes with Reagan?
It is a coincidence. It is, yeah, complete.
So you touched on this, but maybe if you could expand on this. What do you think the Republican Party of today can learn from Ronald Reagan? Because they've certainly strayed, haven't they?
Well, yeah, when you look at the Republican Party of today, specifically in the years post-Reagan, they turned or morphed into what I would consider very Democrat-like. It's very hard to distinguish between the two parties. We no longer have bold colors of principles that we stand on. We waffle. We tend to give away our principles based for some common good. We run candidates that, like a McCain or maybe a Romney, and I didn't really necessarily see anything bad in Romney. He just didn't necessarily uphold or evoke the principles of small government, which really was the basis of what Reagan was about, was making the government small so the people are freer. So the individual, not the people as a collective, but as the individual, can aspire to greater things and achieve the American dream. And only when government is smaller and limited is that possibility within their reach. We see it now with, and I live in California, and I'm from Illinois. So I'm from Reagan country. Also Barack Obama, got his foothold there in politics. And there's a lot of corruption going on in Illinois, and there's a lot of crazy environmentalism going on in California, which has just completely, destroyed some opportunity for those that live here and want to stay here to thrive. And we are seeing mass exodus out of California based on this failed liberalism, which even Arnold Schwarzenegger adopted through his environmental policies. And this is what I mean by the Republican Party losing its way. Just because there's an R behind the name does not mean that this candidate is going to be the next Reagan or even believes like Reagan. And we've seen that time and time again. So I do hope that, and we did see a resurgence in what I would call conservatism, from the Tea Party rising up, asking taxed enough already, smaller government, stop telling you what kind of light bulbs I can buy, something that simple, and across the board in these last two elections, when it comes down to state elections and governorships, we've seen a lot of senators now that rise that are out of that surge, whether it be Cruz or Paul. So there is some turn. History tends to repeat itself, and I think that the American people are only pushed so far until they fight back, and it's usually right off to the edge, and then they start to fight back. So they're impacting local elections with I would say a rebirth of what true conservatism means, and that I always go back and was the greatest champion was Reagan.
Yeah. There's an interesting question birthed out of that, because you just mentioned Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. In 2012, I was leaning towards Ron Paul, even though I was a little skittish on his foreign policy, but he was definitely small government. Who do you personally lean more towards, Ted Cruz or Rand Paul?
If I just had to pick between the two, or
Yes.
just the general field that we might see in 2016?
If you had to pick between the two.
Oh, geez. That's a little tough. I guess I would probably lean a little bit more towards Cruz, simply because I haven't necessarily seen him waffle as much on some issues that Rand has. Although, I do have a great amount of respect for Rand Paul. Reagan said it best. The Republican Party always had a small L in it, a small libertarian flair. So I like that side of Paul that he brings. I like the fact that he doesn't want, to fund, the foreign aid, like basically eliminate foreign aid in countries that want to do us harm and are using the aid against us. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of positions that he's taken that show he's not necessarily his father. I don't think he's as big of an isolationist as his dad was. I think that he's taken some strong stands on what ISIS is doing and with this supposed negotiation with Iran. But Cruz, to me, I have watched him since he won, and I watched his filibuster and was really impressed. I think he is a great debater. I would love to see him, debate some Democrats, whether that be Hillary or Elizabeth or O'Malley out of Maryland. So I have some confidence there. He doesn't tend to waver.
Yeah. Will ReaganBaby.com officially endorse a presidential candidate in 2016?
I haven't even thought that far ahead. I'm never one to be quiet, though. So I guess if I have an opinion, people are going to know it.
Yeah, exactly. You touched on this, and this probably is a controversial question, but it seems odd to me because when I think of anti-Semitism, I think of Nazis and neo-Nazis. But is there a connection today, directly or indirectly, with anti-Semitism and liberalism? Can we make that claim?
I hate to paint things with broad brushes and make that claim. Like I always call it, there's such a hasty generalization, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
Once you say that, then all of a sudden you're branded, as whatever crazy person. But I think that when you look at history, there always tends to be liberals on the wrong side of it.
Yeah.
So whether it was Ted Kennedy cozying up to the Russians and trying to undermine the Cold War, undermine Reagan's successes on ending the Cold War. Mm-hmm. If you look at what's going on now with Iran and Israel, I think that the snub of Bibi Netanyahu was deplorable.
Yeah, right.
Nancy Pelosi can have someone like Sandra Fluke speak to the Senate, on behalf of free birth control. But God forbid that Bibi comes and wants to speak directly to the American people about the threats he's facing. And quite frankly, I learned a lot from that speech. And I think that many Americans learned a lot from that speech because we weren't getting his side of the story. And we certainly weren't being fed factual information of truly what was going on in Iran and also with ISIS, because just months before we were told that they were a JV team. And now all of a sudden they have a predominant hold in Yemen and surrounding countries. So I don't want to say that the liberals are anti-Semites, but their actions and their history have showed that they have been on the wrong side of it when it comes to freedom. When you look at Israel, it's maybe the size of Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. Anyone can practice their faith there. They have mosques, they have churches, they have Buddhists, anyone can practice their faith. But when right across the border, everything is outlawed but Islam. Yeah. So you tell me what side of the coin. If you're so tolerant and empathetic to everybody, why isn't that empathy shown to Israel where true freedom prospers? Especially freedom of the individual, freedom of religion. I mean, they mirror us in our republic in many ways. But the liberals tend to see our republic as one that is imperialistic and one that is the cause of all this hatred around the world. The cause of the problems. We are the imperialist nation. We are the aggressors. That tends to be their philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so, I would say if they're not anti-Semitic, I would just say they're really more anti-tolerant. They're just not tolerant. They're anti-tolerant. They're anti-freedom of the individual. I've seen it time and time again.
Yes. Now, I want to be fair and balanced, so I must turn my attention a little bit to the Democrats. Is Hillary going to be able to survive this email scandal?
Only if we let her. And that is, but when you have someone like Eric Holder heading up the DOJ, where is their justice? How is justice administered? It's certainly not through an objective lens. Mm-hmm. We've seen that with the Holder Justice Department. He'll go after someone that owns Gibson Guitars, a private company, but who just so happens to be a large contributor to Republicans. He'll go after, he'll want to bring terrorists to our New York court system and try them as criminals instead of war criminals. Yet he'll let Lois Lerner walk free. Yeah. So, if it's up to our DOJ to have any sort of say in this, she'll walk. But I think that this should impact her 2016 campaign. I think it's completely damaged her brand. I think the fact that she, started championing herself as, breaking glass ceilings, and she is the advocate for women. And then all of a sudden we find out that the Clinton Foundation took $50 million from misogynistic countries like Saudi Arabia, who don't even let women drive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think her credibility has been severely damaged. I hope that the criminality of her conduct will be tried.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another interesting question, and you brought this up, but maybe we could expand on it. What are women voters looking for in 2016?
I think women voters are looking for the same thing in a candidate that they've always looked for. And I wrote about this on ReaganBaby.com, and it was Dear GOP, the gender gap 1984 is calling, pick up the phone. And what Reagan did in his exploratory committee for president, and he did it twice, he wanted to see, of course, what were the interests of the American people in demographics, men, women. And he found that women basically wanted the same thing as men when it comes to voting, and that is leadership. That is someone who they believe can do the job and do it well and lead. And he, that's where, were you better off than you were 4 years ago, and women, that 1984 election was the only time that the Republicans got the majority of 56% of the women's vote, which is the magic number. And his message to women was the same to men. And women have always been, and will continue to be, kind of what I would consider the managers of the household, whether they're single women, married women, divorced women, whatever kind of women you are, you tend to know, what's going on in the house as far as the finances, the bills, and your kids' education. Those costs are going through the roof. Your family's health care, those costs. I have a friend, family of 4, went up over $12,000 in 1 year because of Obamacare.
Wow.
These are significant costs that are affecting the family, in so much the cost that they have less money to save, less money to spend on themselves, and less money to give to charity or church if they choose to, because all of the money through taxes and regulations is going to the big fat government. And so I think women see this. They're very aware of what's going on. We're impacted economically just like men are. We do have an altruistic side that men tend not to have when it comes to voting, and that has to do with helping the poor and what government role should play, or larger government role. And we have another altruistic sense, and it was helping the poor and the environment. Mm-hmm. So we tend to vote, altruistically on those two issues. But and you would think it was abortion, right? I mean, you would think that wedge issue, which is constantly being brought up about Republicans having a war on women's health care rights, that issue polls out to the same as men. So there aren't women going in, droves to the polls to save abortion. Mm-hmm. So when you look at all the facts and you look at all the exit polls, it's simple economics.
You mentioned that women tend to lean towards helping the poor and altruistic goals. And there is a perception out there that the Democrats are the party of the poor and they're the party of women. But I understand, and I read this on your website, ReaganBaby.com. I understand, for instance, that the Obama administration hasn't been very effective with closing the pay gap within their own administration, have they?
No, as far as gender equality and pay?
Right.
No, that gap hasn't been closed at all. It's quite funny. One of his first bills that he signed when he was president was in 2009. It was the Lilly Ledbetter Act. And supposedly Lilly Ledbetter Act was going to level the playing field, make sure that everyone gets paid equally for equal work. Well, when you put your name on a piece of legislation and then hire women in your administration and don't conduct yourself in accordance with the law you just signed, Barack Obama was paying 71 cents on every dollar to a woman that a man would make for the same job. Same with Hillary Clinton. So, again, numbers don't lie. You just look at the numbers and you look at the actions and you try to match them up. The narrative is really good that they've constructed for themselves. The brand is really good that they've constructed for themselves. The press is really good at carrying that brand and making sure the headlines make them look really good in the spotlight. But when you look at the facts, the hypocrisy shows.
Exactly. And that's a great segue. You just talked about the press. The liberal media is very effective in changing public opinion. I've seen this in my lifetime. It's just incredible how different public opinion is on certain things. One example is gay marriage. How do conservatives control the dialogue when the media is so effective?
Well, that's a good question. I think that it's going to have to come where we just start getting louder. Mm-hmm. The fact that, and we have to be very culturally aware of what's going on as far as trends. There's a culture war going on. We've got to appeal more to a pop culture sense. I mean, when you see conservatives, we dominate Twitter. But yet, the talking heads of the conservative movement necessarily don't even know how to use it or how to brand themselves effectively in it. So when you have these hashtag campaigns going on, like Boycott Indiana, I wrote about this, Who's Your Daddy? This is my latest post on Boycott Indiana, and Hoosier, of course, being an Indiana Hoosier. And that question was to Mike Pence, because he waffled, he backtracked on something that wasn't even related to gay marriage.
Right.
This RFRA law wasn't even related to gay marriage. And 2 weeks prior to that, another hashtag campaign was generated by Sir Elton John. And that was Boycott Dolce & Gabbana. Now, the reason that Elton John started Boycott Dolce & Gabbana was because Dolce & Gabbana believed in traditional marriage. Mm-hmm. And so Elton John took great offense at that, as well as their position on in vitro fertilization, and asked the world and his bajillion followers to boycott. He was somewhat effective, but Dolce and Gabbana did not back down from their stance like Pence. They came forward and said, this is how we were raised, basically. This is what we believe. And we shouldn't be, we're not going to, apologize for it. And what they said made perfect sense. And I think that we've gotten into this, some leadership in the GOP gets so overwhelmed by the backlash, what Mike Pence said. He was just overwhelmed and surprised by it. But he caved to the narrative that should never have existed, because gay marriage was never a part of the RFRA. Mm-hmm. So he kind of just gave them a win. So if you continue to have this buckling going on, right. And that's one of the reasons why I started The Heat, ReaganBaby.com and The Heat, is because, there is so much press out there that is creating a false narrative. Whether it's hands up, don't shoot, the RFRA law is discriminatory against gays. I mean, pick one.
Right.
So
exactly.
I always try to get to the truth.
Yes. Again, the website is ReaganBaby.com. I highly recommend you checking out this website on a regular basis, ReaganBaby.com. The founder is Megan Barth. Megan, thank you so much for being our guest this week.
Well, that was a quick 30 minutes, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
Great.
So thank you.
Thanks, Megan. And joining me this week is Paul Ziegfeld. Paul Ziegfeld was the youngest intern hired at an NBC affiliate after sneaking into the building. He then landed the job at CBS Radio because he was the only person to trudge through the biggest blizzard of the decade for the interview. Years went by with day jobs as a stage tech, to night jobs headlining comedy clubs, to puppeteering for Jim Henson on a Tuesday, to writing jokes for the Letterman Show on a Wednesday. Now, He's on the eve of his retirement after 25 years of a show business career. He is author of the new book, Breaking Out of Show Business, What I've Discovered by Not Being Discovered. Michael, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Oh, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate it. That is a long, detailed introduction, but I do appreciate it.
Now, the title of your book, of course, is Breaking Out of Show Business. What does it mean to break out of show business?
Well, I think most people want to break in. And, that climb, is a dangling carrot that always changes. And I can't tell you how many people are rarely fulfilled. You know, it's so strange. Anyone in any industry, when you go into an industry that you're passionate about, but then what it takes to feel validated kind of poisons the well a little bit. I think you get to a certain age where you realize, hey, in the end, none of that really matters. And many people say, well, you had so many different careers, you must have been such a go-getter. And the truth is, it was really just panic. It was out of pure panic about, should I support myself? Could I succeed? Was there a place for me? And, I turn around, 25 years later and I decided I was ready to stop that chase. And, someone asked me to write a book about it. I thought, well, who's going to read another book about show business from someone that nobody knows? And, I think that's why they found it so tangible. It's really talking about being alongside fame and, with, some little tidbits about a lot of different celebrities that people might be interested in, but more relatable is that we all have to work and, how do you get people to take your calls and how do you know when it's time to stop?
Yeah. Do you think it's harder today to break into show business than when you started?
Well, a lot of people say it's not as hard to be infamous. I mean, with reality shows and things like that, people are just, aching for anything to latch on to. But as far as being a star, I think it's harder. I think, back many generations ago, people were discovered on the street, and it didn't matter if you had an agent or a manager or a publicist. And now everything is so prepackaged, and people are afraid to put all their money into something new. Everyone wants the next best thing, but no one wants to say yes to it and commit to it in case it fails. So in that regard, I do think it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah. And you of course have been a longtime comedian. What do you think is more important, a good joke or a good delivery?
Absolutely a good delivery. I mean, there have been comedians, old vaudeville comedians, where their material was horrible, but maybe they delivered it in a manner where they knew it was horrible and they were trying to put one over on the audience, and that's what made it funny. So I think that, if you think it's funny, it'll be considered funny by the audience, if not for the reason you wanted, then at least for the reason that you tried.
And do you think comedians are better or worse today?
Well, I think, comedy is very organic and it grows and changes just like anything else. I think the problem is that everybody nowadays has 5 minutes of material. Rarely, in my view, does it. I'm only 43, but I started pretty young. So I had a taste of the old guard, Don Rickles, Joan Rivers, and then the Seinfeld years and all of that. So, those two generations really knew how to construct a story and a joke. But now with, 6-minute snippets on TV, I think people just know how to be sarcastic and be an angry guy. There's not a lot of structure there. And I find that I can't really blame the comedians because no one's expecting more of them. But I feel like it's not really always my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. I was a huge fan of David Letterman in the 80s. I was in high school, and I really loved his show on NBC. I think it changed a little bit as time went on. Tell us, how did you get involved with the David Letterman show?
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. I was a huge fan of Dave, and I think that's where his fan base came from when he was at NBC. I think that loyalty is the only thing that keeps people watching. I think that he always wanted to beat Johnny Carson, and I think that once he took the chair at CBS and his ticket was written for him, I think he got a little lazy. What he was known for were, great, live interruptions and getting celebrities to do things they wouldn't normally do. And don't get me wrong, he's a great interviewer when he wants to be. Really interesting, but he's, I think that, he rested on his laurels and just wanted to be the old timer. As far as, working for him went, back in the day, if you were not a staff writer, and you had an in with somebody, there was a special fax line where you could fax in pages of jokes, and they'd say, okay, well, we're going to buy 10 out of the 30 jokes, and they pay you for it, and then you sit at home and watch to see if Dave would actually, say those jokes. That eventually turned into, a lot of the book talks about moments where, it could have been bigger, it could have been better, or it's a bunch of really wonderful, successful one-offs, like directing Kevin Spacey or, working for Donald Trump or something like that, but they never turned into anything else is what, a lot of the book is about, a lot of unbelievable stuff. And the same thing with Dave Letterman. I was given a role to be in a sketch. I'm sitting in the audience waiting to go on. Michael J. Fox goes on and does 3 full segments about Parkinson's. I mean, he's had it for 20 years. Don't we all know he has Parkinson's? I'm a young kid. I'm sitting in the audience, and I'm like, you're screwing me. You're ruining my chance here, it's always been those almost moments, and yet to most people, it's, I've done more than some and less than others.
Yeah, and again, the book is Breaking Out of Show Business, Paul Ziegfeld. Very entertaining, informative book. And I don't want to give away too much about the book by going point by point, but you have some great chapters on Rodney Dangerfield showing up at the comedy club, how you met Winona Ryder, being in the room backstage with Don Rickles and Joan Rivers, and being part of the Jerry Lewis telethon, straightening out William Shatner at a sci-fi convention. A lot of great stories in this book. What's your favorite story, though?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, like I said, I've had several careers, that have just happened by pure accident. If I had to choose a career I've enjoyed the best, it would probably be puppeteering for special effects, film and television, the Jim Henson Company, and Star Wars and things like that. It's a great job because it's comedy and music and technology, and I never have to worry about going bald or getting fat because no one can ever see me. But all these years I thought that I couldn't find my niche, but now 25 years later, all of these experiences have really pointed to my current niche, which is as a director and a consultant, understanding all areas of production and talent and packaging in the business has really, telegraphed who I am now, in addition to the art of interpersonal skills, how to disarm people and get them to talk to you and hire you.
And this is a great book, Breaking Out of Show Business, What I've Discovered by Not Being Discovered, by Paul Ziegfeld. And Michael, is the secret to longevity in this business perseverance, knocking on as many doors as possible, being thick-skinned? Would that be accurate?
I think that's absolutely part of it, but I'll tell you, what I learned, and so far late in life, I wish I learned it earlier, and this is really with anyone in any area of any working industry, is that, you're going to get a lot of no's, and that's because you're trying to squeeze yourself into their mold. And while you need to have a portion of what they require to get their job done, it is the uniqueness of you, if you can really be in tune with that, that will make people want you. And a lot of us don't figure that out for a very long time until we get frustrated and throw up our hands and just say, I'm going to do my own thing. And then that's when everyone starts giving you some attention. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's really it, learning to be the most you. I mean, obviously you can't be so strange that people can't, it's unrelatable, but, and you don't want to be, repelling people. But I think really, understanding, what your strengths are and use that as a motivator instead of, going against the current.
I tried my hand in the 90s I owned a professional wrestling company, and it went for a few years and it went out of business. I was horrible at it. Now I have a 9-to-5 job and a radio job. But and I love radio. But I had some wrestling friends that were wrestlers that didn't make it in the wrestling business, but then they got involved in Hollywood, and some of them did some reality shows and bit parts in movies and all of that. And I noticed that a lot of them had financial problems because they would get this big paycheck and then they'd maybe go off and act in something else and not get paid right away, and then they'd have to sit it out and kind of white knuckle until they got another paycheck. Has that been a problem for you?
Well, I think anyone that works for themselves in any industry has that issue. It can be beast or fat. And I think that most people learn later in life how to make those paychecks stretch. I mean, the money in show business can be very lucrative, but it's not always that kind of a paycheck. So absolutely, I think that is a factor. A lot of people also have an ego where when you're working, trying to work towards a career that, is not the easiest in society, you can't really have a lot of ego about it. You might have to, pull up your britches and go have a day job or a night job. I certainly had that over the years here and there during a few lead times. I mean, people look at my resume and they think that, I've done very well, but listen, you know as well as I do that every couple of years you get a good resume piece, and then the rest of the time we're just trying to work. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's also good to think about, what is the shelf life of this type of job? I know for me, one of the reasons I wanted to stop performing is because it's getting harder and harder to get the job done. The money isn't building. The venues are shrinking. The people who are in charge of the entertainment now were the food and beverage manager 3 or 4 weeks before. What do they know? Why are they telling me what to do? You just got to kind of look at the writing on the wall.
Now, that's an interesting point you just made about the financial situation of entertainment. And when I was younger, like around the same age you were at the same years, we had these rock bands that would fill out these large auditoriums, and then somewhere in the 90s they started playing small clubs, and things have changed totally in terms of the financials in the entertainment business. Why is that? Is that because of the internet? Was it the recession of 2008? What has happened?
Well, I think, first of all, people with reality shows, now everyone wants to be the star. I think that's number one. Number two, nowadays people have a lot of entertainment at home, with, Netflix and things like that. People aren't going out as much. But also, really, the entertainment at live locations, they are a loss. They are not a moneymaker. The moneymaker is the restaurant, the bar, the casino. They don't want celebrities to do more than an hour and 10-minute show anymore because they want people out on the property making money. So I think that, while it's still necessary to have it, I don't think they know how to monetize properly anymore.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, that makes total sense, though. Now, if there's a teenager who's listening tonight who has similar interests as the path you've taken, what do you wish you would have been told about the entertainment business at their age?
Well, one of the things that I did do correctly was I started interning as early as I could. A lot of kids don't get to intern at television or radio stations or theaters until they're in college, but the high schools do provide a work-study program, and usually those kids go to vocational schools and things like that. But if you get yourself a job, like I did, at the local stations, that's acceptable also, and it's as far as what you're going to learn and how quickly you move along, and also how the contacts that you make there will grow as you get older. So I think starting locally, no matter what area of work you're trying to do, don't go to the place where it's the big source. There's a million people trying to do it. Get a name for yourself where you're at and sharpen your teeth, and then you can grow from there.
Great. Michael Paul Ziegfeld, the author of Breaking Out of Show Business, What I've Discovered by Not Being Discovered. This is a great book. Michael, thank you so much for joining us this week.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bruce Collins Show, where you can find us every Friday night at midnight here at WWPR 1490 AM. Remember, God loves you. We do too. Don't give up.